Good morning and welcome to the webcast. We have just a few reminders today. The slides will advance automatically throughout the presentation. Should you need technical assistance, click on the Help button. You are encouraged to submit a question at any time during today's presentation by typing it in the Ask a Question tab and clicking Submit. If your screen freezes or the slides do not appear to be advancing as they should, please try exiting and restarting the session, as it may be an issue with your connectivity. I will now turn the call over to Michael Doherty in the Office of Communications and Outreach at the Ohio Department of Education. Please go ahead, Michael.
Thank you and good morning. We appreciate you joining today's webcast. Before we begin our session, there are just a few items to share with you. Today's webcast is designed to share information with you and connect with you to answer questions. You may submit your question at any time using the chat function. We are pleased that so many of you are able to join us this morning. We will have time for questions, but in order to stay within our time frame, we will not be able to answer all questions individually. However, all submitted questions will be reviewed to provide you with future guidance. Please note, the Documents tab has a set of resource links to accompany information presented in today's webcast. Lastly, today's session is being recorded and will be available for playback. I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker today. Good morning to Dr. Chris Woolard, Senior Executive Director in the Center for Accountability and Continuous Improvement. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning for today. And we have many superintendents and EMIS coordinators participating in today's webcast, and I know your schedules are busy, and I appreciate you carving time out of your schedule to join us. There's obviously a lot of questions and concerns regarding the report card this year. We understand that this year is unusual in many ways, and we view this as a transitional report card, and we hope to provide some additional details this morning on the data reporting for the report card. We're going to start at a very high level and then drill into some more details as we get through the webcast. From a big picture, Ohio continues to raise expectations for all students, and the new report card shines a light on key areas such as how well students are prepared for college and work and how districts are supporting young struggling readers. Ohio has worked to improve reading for our youngest learners with the K-3 Literacy Improvement Measure, which was added to help measure how well districts are helping students who are struggling with reading. Many districts focused their improvement efforts on struggling readers and saw improved grades on the K-3 measure this year. Again, we know that this is an unusual situation this year with the timeline for when the report cards are to be released based on the transition to new tests. We view this as a one-year issue and plan to be back on a more normal schedule for the 15-16 report card, which will be released in the summer of 2016. There have been a lot of changes in the past year, and the General Assembly has recognized that by creating safe harbor provisions for this report card, so there is an opportunity to adjust to new expectations. While we are required to give grades for individual measures, there are no sanctions, so it creates a space to set new baseline expectations, and in fact, the General Assembly has allowed targets to be adjusted in some cases. So while we may expect some achievement scores to go down, we have adjusted the targets for the indicators met measure. We know that there is much interest in seeing data as soon as possible, and we are working diligently to get that to you as soon as we can. Again, we view this as a transition year, and this is much later than we would like, but this is necessary during this transition year. On January 14th, a few weeks ago, we released Part 1 of the report card, including information on K-3 literacy, graduation, and the Prepare for Success pieces. On February 25th, we will release Part 2 of the report card, which will include the remaining components, including the achievement measures, gap closing, and the progress value-added measures, as well as information about gifted students and district financial expenditures. On that date, we will also release the career technical report cards, as well as the dropout recovery community school report cards. As a reminder, this year's report card will look a lot like last year's report card, and that there are 10 individual measures, up to 10, that will be graded on the report card. These are the same 10 measures that were on last year's report card. So your school or district will receive up to 10 graded measures. Here's a list. You should hopefully be very familiar with these measures by now. Again, Ohio law requires that grades are given for these individual measures. And while safe harbor means that we won't yet be combining them into component or overall grades, we will be providing individual grades this year, just as we did last year. Previously, we'd done an in-depth webcast that got into questions and details around these particular measures, including how participation impacts those. And I'm guessing many of you were on that webcast, but if you're not, you can access a recording of that webcast to get into the details of these measures for the report card.
Thank you very much, Chris. Now I'm pleased to introduce David Ely, Director of EMIS. Good morning, David.
Well, good morning. And again, let me join Chris in thanking you for spending some time with us this morning to talk about finalizing data for the report cards that Chris has just described. You know, the most important question really for districts at this point in looking at the report card is evaluating the status of your data as it applies to the report card that is to be published in February. And so there are a couple of key questions that you really want to ask yourself. Do I have a substantive issue in the data currently submitted to ODE? We had a lot of data coming into the department late in the fall and also in the month of January that will be appearing on the February 25th release of the local report card. Now is the time to take a look back at that data and to look at your reports in our Secure Data Center, the SDC, and understand if you do have data issues that still could be resolved or need to be resolved for the publishing of the report card on February 25th. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what are the tools that are available for you to evaluate the completeness of your data. Many districts are in great shape as far as their data is concerned. There are some other districts where when we look at their data, there are some concerns about, you know, is the data really complete for that district? And then finally, one of my colleagues here in the data team at ODE will talk about if you have an issue, what are the next steps that you need to take? How is it that we work through this process to make sure that the report card published on February 25th is something that we can all feel good about? So there are certain critical data sets that are involved with the upcoming report card release. As you would assume, we have a number of assessments that do need to be reported accurately for the report card results to be accurate. And so that would include the grade 3 results for reading, the grade 3 through 8 results for math, and the grade 4 through 8 results for reading for all of those grade 3 through 8 students. The Ohio graduation tests are also still on the local report card this year, and so it's important to make sure that those OGTs are reported. The new end-of-course assessments also appear on the report card and need to be double-checked to make sure they're all complete, as well as in some cases for districts that have IB or AP programs for science and social studies. Some of those IB and AP exams can take the place of end-of-course assessments. And so there are some IB and AP exams that also will appear on the report card released in February. In addition to the assessment data, the enrollment of students, especially as it relates to the majority of attendance information on students, is critical for the release of the report card. In general, students who were enrolled in the district from the first week of October through the administration of the test in the spring are considered to have met majority of attendance in the district and therefore would count for the district in the academic measures on the report card. One of the things that we have observed and that we've been in communication with districts about is unusually high numbers of students who do not have a majority of attendance yet assigned. And so we reached out to districts while the data was being submitted, and many districts did clean up that data during the submission window that closed on January 8th. However, there may be some additional students that still need to be reviewed for that majority of attendance designation. And then finally, related to enrollment are the demographics of students during the window when they are enrolled. For the most part, we determine the demographic status for subgroups such as students with disabilities, limited English proficient students, economically disadvantaged students, and gifted students. In general, those are determined based on the status of the student as of March 31st during this school year. And so any issues with students' data reported as of March 31st could cause a student to appear in the incorrect subgroups for things such as gap closing and AMOs, some of the other areas that we look at where subgroups of students are important to the calculation. And then finally, the third piece of critical data for the report card release coming up in February has to do with the reading diagnostic results and the reading improvement and monitoring plans being reported for students in kindergarten through third grade. The reading diagnostic results indicate whether or not a student is on track or not on track as of when they were assessed in the fall of 2014. And the reading improvement and monitoring plans indicate if the student had a reading improvement plan during the 14-15 school year. So what are some of the tools that a district might use to evaluate their assessment data? Within the data submission system, known to EMIS coordinators as the data collector, there are various missing lists that are produced as a part of the submission of the assessment data. These missing lists are meant to indicate issues that the district should check. They don't absolutely mean that a test record is missing, but it's highlighting those students where there may be an issue that the district wants to do further research with. Now, one common question we've gotten from EMIS coordinators is, since that window has closed, how do I access those lists? There is a checkbox on the first page of the data collector that says show expired collections. This collection is expired for the assessment since those windows have closed, but if you uncheck that box, you will be able to see the collection, you will be able to run a prepare, and be able to view these missing lists. That's important because now that the data windows have closed, we have been working over the last week to clean up several of those missing lists for situations where a student has an assessment in one submission window but not another. For example, many of you may have seen students on your missing list for the 3 through 8 assessments who are actually students on an alternate assessment who were reported in a different reporting window. Now that the windows are closed, if we have an alternate assessment for a student, we have gone into the system and removed the requirement for them to have a regular 3 through 8 assessment. So many of you will find that your missing lists have fewer students on them today than they had when the window closed approximately a week ago. So I encourage all EMIS coordinators on the call, and if your EMIS coordinator, the superintendent, is not on the call, please ask them to recheck their missing lists in the assessment submissions. Another tool that you have available to check the status of your data is our Secure Data Center. There are 2 levels of access to the Secure Data Center, one called Standard Level Access, the other called Student Level Access. If you have Student Level Access, which many EMIS coordinators have, you can right-click on the headers in the Secure Data Center and drill, it's a function within the system, to the SSID level to show you which SSIDs are being included in each measure on the report card. So we encourage you to take a look at that as we prepare for the February 25th release, and as you prepare for the appeal window to find out and see if there are students who are or not counting in a way that is appropriate from your perspective. In the end, if from the missing report of the Secure Data Center, you determine that you have a test score for a student, you do need to report those test scores. If you determine that the student was supposed to be assessed but was not, but was enrolled during the window, then again, it is important for you to submit a test assessment record for that student with the appropriate reason test not taken. Why did the student not take the test? In terms of tools related to your enrollment and demographic data, I would direct you to your student enrollment-based reports called the FTE detail and adjustment reports that are available within the data collector. Again, the student collections have expired because those windows are no longer open, but by unchecking that box on the first page of the data collector, you will still be able to review the Level 2 reports for the FTE detail and adjustment reports. That report will help you see if there are students who were enrolled in your district who were not properly reported to the department because they'll be missing from that report. Likewise, if students have enrollment dates that are incorrect, you would be able to determine that using that report. Probably the most important level 2 report from the student collection is the Where Kids Count report. The Where Kids Count report is produced by ODE based upon the majority of attendance IRN that you submit to the department. We take the majority of attendance IRN you submit and the other data elements that it can impact whether or not a student counts on the report card and where they count, whether it's at the building level or at the district level. We complete those calculations and the information is included on the Where Kids Count report. In addition, all of the demographic information that we are using for the report card, with the exception of gifted information, is included on that Where Kids Count report. For gifted related information, you do need to go to the gifted report that we publish as well. So those are the key reports and where you can look as an EMIS coordinator or as a superintendent. You can ask your EMIS coordinator for those reports to be able to see the status of students when it comes to who's counting in the report card and where are they counting by subgroup. And then finally, we have our reading diagnostics and our reading improvement and monitoring plans. Students in each part of the measure, just as with the academic measures, are available by drilling in the Secure Data Center report if you have student level access. If you're not sure what your access level is, I've neglected to mention this before, that access is set within the department's OEDS, the Ohio Educational Directory System. And so your OEDS administrator can assign the Secure Data Center roles to anybody within your district that needs to have access to the Secure Data Center to review these reports, again, either at the high level where the information is provided that will appear on the report card, or to be able to drill down in the SDC to be able to see it at the SSID level, which students are counting in the numerator, which are counting in the denominator. The FY15 reading diagnostic reporting is important for more than just the FY15 report card that we're going to release. Any student who is not on track as of FY15 will become part of the denominator, part of the group of students who will be included in the K3 measure for the FY16 report card. And so while obviously the top priority is making sure that we have everything right for the February 25th report card, it is important to review all of your reading diagnostic results to make sure that you have established the correct subgroup of students to be included in your report for the FY16 report card. The best way to look at who has a reading diagnostic and a RIMP reported is to use the preview of the GQ and FN records. I apologize to the superintendents, but that should mean something to your EMIS coordinators. The GQ record is the program record where you report the reading improvement and monitoring plans that students are on. And the FN record is a miscellaneous record that has data about individual students. The FN record takes care of the details of the reading diagnostic results. And so again, those are available for review in the data system, the data collector, and that's what an EMIS coordinator should look at to know if their reading diagnostics and their RIMPS are reported correctly. And that covers the data that is included in the release coming up February 25th.
Thank you very much, David. Now to discuss the appeals process, I'm pleased to introduce Heather Boughton, Director in the Office of Data Quality. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning, and I'd like to echo my colleagues here in thanking all of you for your time this morning. We've talked a little bit about what we can expect to see on the February 25th report card release, and David has spent some time talking about how you can review the data that will be factored into that release. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about, the next step if you discover that there is still a remaining issue with your data reporting. So we're going to talk a little bit about the data appeals process. First, I'd like to spend a little bit of time giving you some background on the data appeals process. This is a relatively new opportunity for districts. We are now in our second year of having a formal data appeals process administered by the department. This process was developed out of an acknowledgement of the importance, the significant impact that reported data has on students' opportunities, and also an acknowledgement of our shared commitment to getting this data right and making sure that our students have all the opportunities that they deserve. In addition, we understand that reporting can be a complex process, and despite everyone's best efforts and the time that we know that you all spend putting into this reporting, sometimes mistakes do happen. And so we wanted to create a system where even after the reporting window closes, you have an opportunity to correct any remaining issues before the report cards are released. The data appeals process is administered by the Office of Data Quality, and you can see our email address here. If after this presentation or at any time you have any questions about the data appeals process, you can certainly feel free to contact us, and we'll do our best to help you through the process. To submit a data appeal, we'll need superintendents to log into their SAFE accounts and go to the Forms application, and there you'll find the data appeals option. There are step-by-step instructions on how to submit a data appeal on our website. In addition, you can click on the set of document resources located in the Webcast console today to access those step-by-step instructions. There are several sections of the data appeal form that we've asked districts to fill out in completing the form. The first is a basic description of the reporting issue. So this would include information along the lines of what category of data are you concerned about? Is it assessment data? Is it demographic data? The number of records that you anticipate needing to update. The second section is essentially an impact analysis. In other words, what we're looking for is to understand a little bit more about how this is going to affect your report card results. So an example might be that we've misreported some assessment data, and we anticipate that our percent proficient on our state assessments would increase if we had the opportunity to fix this issue. Third section is the corrective action plan, and I'd like to talk a little bit about this in particular. This is currently considered a required portion of the form within the system itself. However, we recognize that this has been a challenging year in terms of reporting data, and based on concerns from the field, we've made the decision to not require this as part of the data appeals itself. Now, in order to actually submit the form, there does need to be some text in that section. All you need to do at that point is enter NA or not applicable, and you will be able to actually submit the form without going through the process of actually filling out that entire section in detail. Next, you would be asked to fill out and sign off on a series of assurances. The superintendent is essentially saying that the updated information is correct to the best of their knowledge, and in addition, the superintendent would be asked to confirm that they've consulted with their EMIS coordinators and other relevant staff in putting together the data appeal. And finally, there is an option to upload data as part of the appeal. What we're looking for here is some more information about specific students, SSIDs, where you know you're going to need to update data. This kind of information helps us evaluate the scope of the issue and how we might go about correcting it within the systems. Again, in response to some concerns from the field, I wanted to note that you do not have to upload a form or a file here for us to review and accept your appeal. If you would like to submit an appeal without uploading a file, there's a checkbox that you can check, and then you can submit and move on. Okay, I'd like to cover a little bit of information about timelines associated with data appeals. We have multiple windows for data appeals. We had several that closed recently. From November 20th to December 15th, districts had the opportunity to submit a data appeal associated with 2014 Diagnostics and Reading Improvement Monitoring Plan data. They also had the opportunity to submit data appeals associated with the 2014 graduation data and Prepared for Success data. And finally, they had the opportunity to submit data appeals related to the 2016 retention data that factors into the third grade reading guarantee promotion scores. That appeals window has closed at this point. You can no longer submit an appeal related to those pieces of information. Districts who submitted updated data based on these appeals windows will see that they have not yet been reflected in the report card release. And I wanted to note that they would be captured in the February 25th release. There is one appeals window that is currently open that is of significance for your February 25th release. This appeals window opened last Wednesday and will remain open until this Friday, January 29th. It provides districts with the opportunity to appeal any data that was submitted in the student and assessment collections that closed on January 8th and January 15th. These include pieces of information like your majority of attendance IRN, your diagnostic data, or your 2015 assessment data. And note that these are the key data elements that factor into your performance index and indicators that will show up on the February 25th report card. So again, please note that this data appeals window does close on January 29th. If you've gone through the process of reviewing your data, you've found that there's a remaining issue and submitted an appeal, we will notify you once you have an approved appeal. You'll receive a communication from the Data Quality Office noting that your appeal has been approved. The process for actually updating the corrected data is dependent on the nature of the issue as well as the scope of the issue. When you receive your approval notification, you will also receive instructions on how to submit the corrected data. And note that any updates from the prior appeals windows and the current appeal window will be reflected in the February 25th report card release, with the exception of the value-added calculations. So we wanted to go through a few frequently asked questions related to the data appeals process. The first question that we've received quite frequently is, can I still submit an appeal related to my 2014 graduation or Prepared for Success data? No, at this point, the appeal window for that data has closed. It was open from November 20th until December 15th. If you discover that you still have an issue with those data, you may request that a watermark be added to your report card. There's a watermark request form available on the Data Appeals website that was noted earlier. When will the updates resulting from my appeals be reflected in my district's data? With the exception of the value-added calculations, all of the updates that were submitted in the prior appeals windows and that will be submitted in the current appeal window will be reflected on February 25th. How quickly will I receive a formal approval? This really depends on the nature of the issue. So we are handling approvals on a rolling basis, and we'll try to respond to you as quickly as possible. At times, some appeals require a little bit more research on our part and working with the district to determine the exact nature of the issue. And so that sometimes takes a little bit longer, but we are certainly committed to getting back with you as soon as possible. My district misreported data for one student. Should I appeal? We have received several variations on this question. And what I would note is that the appeals process was designed to address reporting errors that will have a significant impact on your report card and on other students' opportunities, educators' opportunities, the district is really in the best position to determine whether or not the data for a single student or a small group of students will have that significant impact. So we will leave it to your discretion to make that determination.
And we have also know that there are always questions around EMIS and the system and how that data does get reported to the state. And so, as is the case always, district EMIS coordinators should follow our regular normal support procedures through their Information Technology Center. We maintain a statewide help desk that EMIS coordinators can put questions into the Information Technology Center. And if the ITC is not able to answer the question, it gets escalated to us at the State Department. And we have multiple staff that monitor those questions throughout the day. However, sometimes, and one of you put this in as a question, if you are still having issues and you need additional help on how to answer your EMIS reporting question issue, you can email us directly at the email address on the screen, emis@education.ohio.gov.
Thank you very much to our presenters this morning. Now is our time where we may connect with you to answer some of the questions you've submitted through the chat box. And as a reminder, due to the number of questions submitted, and in order to stay within our allotted time, we will not be able to answer all questions during the webcast live, but we will be reviewing all questions to provide you with further guidance. To begin our first question, Heather, we had a few questions regarding the deadline and what data is being appealed. Could you confirm the deadline for data appeals?
Yes, I can confirm that the deadline for data appeals is this Friday, January 29th. We'll have through midnight.
Thank you very much. Do we need separate appeals for each EMIS record type?
Great question. No, you can include every appeal for every record type in a single document that you submit to us. And in fact, that is the way the system is set up, to capture all of the issues within one appeal document. So I do want to take that a step further and note, if you should submit an appeal and then after that realize that there is another record type that you also need to appeal, the system itself will not allow you to do that, but that doesn't mean that you don't have other options. So please, if you find yourself in that situation, please contact the Office of Data Quality at dataquality@education.ohio.gov. That information is included in the presentation. And we will make sure that you have the opportunity to submit any further appeals that you need to do before the deadline.
Thank you very much. Our next question, can you confirm how to address inaccurate gifted reported data?
Yes, this is David. For issues with your gifted data, that is handled through an appeal in the same way as the other data types. We did not necessarily talk about it on each slide, but any data that would impact the February 25th release of the report card, which would include gifted identification and other demographic data, can be appealed through these windows through Friday.
David, thank you very much. Our next question. The fall 2014 Algebra 1 scores are not correct in our report. It was shared through an EMIS update that this was a known issue. How long do we have to submit an appeal for a known issue?
There was a news flash that went out not long ago this morning that indicated that the issue with the Algebra 1 scores specifically has been fixed. However, I do want to point one additional thing out. If there is an issue that is a known issue on ODE's end, it is never necessary to file an appeal for that situation. Make us aware of if you think the issue is on our end through the EMIS Help Desk. We will research it. And if we determine it is our error and not a data error on the district's end, we will get that fixed for the report card release, and your district would not have to appeal that and would not receive a watermark for that reason.
Thank you very much. Our next question. What does it mean that a student may be in the missing list, but is not necessarily missing a score?
So one example of that situation is a student who took an Algebra 1 end-of-course exam while they were in 8th grade. That's probably the most common example that you were seeing while the data was being submitted. That student would appear on the missing list for the 3 through 8 math assessments because they did not take an 8th grade math assessment. However, we have cleaned up those reports now that the windows are closed. And for any student where we found a math assessment for an end-of-course assessment who is in 8th grade or below, we have removed them from the missing list for the 3 through 8 math classes.
Thank you very much, David. Our next question. We had some alternate assessments that were not missing but not reported. Do we need to submit a data appeal?
The key factor that you need to consider in whether or not to submit an appeal is whether or not the inclusion of that student's score would cause a substantive change in your results. There may be cases where you have test records that do not appear on a missing list. The missing lists were generated based on an early export from the testing vendors of who took the assessments. So especially if you worked with the assessment vendor to find additional scores for students where that score was not included in your original file release, then those scores most likely are going to count in the report card but would not have been included on the missing list because of the timing issue of when you received the results from the assessment vendor.
Thank you. Our next question. I have some students that their science scores did not get reported with accommodations. Would you recommend filling out an appeal for these students?
In this case, accommodations are not part of any of the calculations that go into the local report card. And so from a report card perspective, if a record was submitted without accommodations, even though accommodations were provided, that in and of itself would not trigger a need for an appeal of those scores.
Thank you very much. Does the posted state test data include alternate assessments?
Yes, all alternate assessments should be appearing in the Secure Data Center preview at this time.
Thank you very much. And we have time for 2 more questions. Which IB and AP exams will impact the report card?
Good morning.
Good morning. And this is Marianne Motley, Director in the Office of Accountability.
The tests that will be used on the report card are the same ones that students can use in place of taking the state's exam for graduation. So for the class of 2018, for physical science, they have the option to take Advanced Placement Physics 1 or Advanced Placement Physics 2, and then International Baccalaureate Physics Standard Level only, or International Baccalaureate Physics Higher Level. And again, those are only class of 18. For biology, for the class of 19 and beyond, there are 2 choices, Advanced Placement Biology or International Baccalaureate Biology. For American history, the choices are Advanced Placement, United States History, or the International Baccalaureate History Route 2, including the study of the history of the Americas. Finally, for American government, the choices are Advanced Placement, U.S. Government and Politics, and International Baccalaureate course selection that is supposed to be approved sometime later this year. And this is on our website under the FAQ for graduation for class of 2015 and beyond.
Marianne, thank you very much. Our next question, will there be high school value added this year?
Another good question. The value added as per state law will not be graded, but schools that are high schools and districts will see data reported on their report card. So they will see a gain reported, but there will be no letter grades, and those high school courses will not be included in your overall value added or the 3 subgroups. Moreover, if you're a middle school and you had students taking high school end of course exams in Algebra 1 or ELA 1 or physical science, Algebra 1 or ELA 1, you will see a value added data for your high school courses at the middle school.
Thank you, Marianne. We have time for one more question before wrapping up this morning. Our last question. I have two students who did not get a waiver filled out. One moved in after testing and one was truant. Do you recommend filling out an appeal for these two students?
So just for consistency's sake, these students should have had an assessment record reported during the regular reporting window. But the question of whether or not to file an appeal really does come down to the substantive question. For the student who moved out before the assessment was given, that student would not have any impact on the report card for the building or the district. However, for the student who was truant, if they were still enrolled during the assessment window, that student could impact the participation rate and the performance index for that district. And so the question would be, is this one student create a substantive change for those two measures for us? That's all going to depend upon the size of the groups, the demographics of the student, and how close the district is to any of the cutoffs for a change in grade. This is the type of situation where you may want to go ahead and submit an appeal with the understanding that it's just one student, but that we would work with you to help evaluate whether or not this is a substantive enough change that we would actually update the report card with that student.
Thank you very much, David. We appreciate everyone's participation this morning, and as a reminder, today's webcast is being recorded and will be available for playback. Before we close today's session, I'll ask Senior Executive Director Chris Whitlock for some closing comments. Chris?
Yeah, well, thank you again. I can't emphasize how much we appreciate your time. Again, we know that this is an unusual year with the timing of the report card and many of the issues surrounding that. We're committed to getting the data right and getting that data out to you as soon as possible, and we hope that today's webcast addressed many of the questions that you have regarding reporting and appeals. We know that there was a few additional questions that were probably much more specific to situations that we'll be following up after the webcast. This webcast will be recorded for those who missed it. And finally, just again, thank you for everything you do for Ohio students. We appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This concludes today's webcast. To ensure that we continue to provide quality webcasts, please take the time to fill out the survey that is currently on your screen about today's session. We appreciate your feedback.